Paul Heyman is laughing. Right now, somewhere backstage, in whatever private space a man of his particular genius retreats to after executing a plan with the kind of flawless, devastating, historically significant precision that he demonstrated on Smackdown last night, Paul Heyman is sitting quietly and laughing to himself with the deep, satisfied, almost frightening contentment of someone who has just watched years of careful preparation detonate exactly as designed. Roman Reigns trusted this man with everything. With his image, with his legacy, with the strategic direction of the most dominant championship reign in WWE's modern history. Roman Reigns looked at Paul Heyman and saw his most loyal soldier, his most indispensable advisor, his wise man, the one person in the entire WWE universe whose loyalty was so foundational and so established that questioning it would have felt like questioning gravity itself. And on SmackDown last night, Paul Heyman reminded Roman Reigns and every single person watching that in professional wrestling, gravity is the one thing that always wins in the end, and the tribal chief just hit the ground from a very, very great height. But here is what makes this SmackDown chapter even more explosive, even more infuriating, even more impossible to look away from than anything that came before it. The mystery attacker, that shadow that has haunted WWE throughout 2026 with relentless violence and terrifying consistency, walked onto that SmackDown stage apparently believing they could exploit the chaos created by Heyman's betrayal for their own agenda. And Logan Paul destroyed them too. Both of them, Roman Reigns and the mystery attacker, the two most dangerous forces in WWE's current power landscape, dismantled on the same SmackDown broadcast by a partnership that nobody built a contingency plan for because nobody believed it was genuinely possible until they watched it happen live with their own eyes. If you are not absolutely incandescent with rage and disbelief right now, then you were not watching closely enough, and Ringrumble 1 is about to make sure you understand every single explosive layer of what went down on SmackDown last night, because this is the episode that changes everything. Let us establish the atmosphere in that arena before the chaos erupted, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why what happened on SmackDown last night landed with the kind of impact that had that live audience completely unhinged from the opening moments of the broadcast. There was already a tension in that building that you could feel through the television screen, the specific, loaded, almost unbearable tension of a SmackDown episode airing in the direct aftermath of seismic events that had already destabilized every power structure and every established relationship in WWE's current landscape. The audience came into that arena knowing that the fallout from Paul Heyman's alignment with Logan Paul was going to demand some kind of response, some kind of reckoning, some kind of confrontation that would either clarify or further complicate the extraordinary situation that professional wrestling's most brilliant strategic mind had created by choosing the most unlikely and most explosive partnership available to him. Roman Reigns walking into that SmackDown environment carried something visibly different about him, and I need you to understand how significant that observation actually is, because Roman Reigns does not typically carry visible emotional weight onto that SmackDown stage. The tribal chief's entire public operating persona has been built on the projection of absolute, unshakable, almost supernatural composure. The stillness, the measured speech, the controlled physicality, the complete absence of the kind of emotional reactivity that makes lesser performers predictable and therefore manageable. Roman Reigns' composure has always been one of his most powerful competitive tools, precisely because it communicates to opponents and audiences alike that nothing you do reaches him on an emotional level deep enough to compromise his strategic clarity. But Heyman's betrayal reached him. You could see it, in the set of his jaw, in the particular quality of his silence, in the way his eyes moved around that arena with a searching quality that the standard tribal chief stillness does not typically contain. Roman Reigns came to SmackDown last night hurt in a way that goes far deeper than physical damage, hurt in the specific, devastating way that only genuine betrayal by a genuinely trusted person can produce. And that hurt, that crack in the tribal chief's armor, was precisely the vulnerability that Paul Heyman had calculated for, and precisely the opening that Logan Paul was prepared to exploit with maximum efficiency and maximum violence. Paul Heyman's entrance onto that SmackDown stage with Logan Paul alongside him was a masterclass in psychological warfare executed at the very highest level of professional wrestling's dark arts. The visual alone, Heyman in his element, commanding that microphone with the absolute confidence of a man who knows every word he is about to say, has been engineered for maximum devastation, Logan Paul beside him radiating the particular energy of someone who has been given both the tools and the permission to fully commit to a version of himself that professional wrestling uniquely enables, that visual communicated volumes before a single syllable was spoken. And when Heyman spoke, every word was a precisely aimed surgical strike at the specific psychological vulnerabilities that his years alongside Roman Reigns had given him unique and intimate knowledge of. This is the truly diabolical dimension of Paul Heyman's betrayal that I do not think receives sufficient analysis in the immediate shock of its execution. Heyman spent years as Roman's wise man. Years absorbing information, observing patterns, identifying insecurities and pressure points and the specific circumstances under which Roman's composure becomes most susceptible to fracture. Paul Heyman knows Roman Reigns more completely and more accurately than virtually anyone else alive. And last night on Smackdown he used every single piece of that knowledge as a weapon pointed directly at the man who granted him that access through years of genuine trust. That is not just strategic betrayal. That is the weaponization of intimacy. And there is no more devastating or more personally destructive form of attack available in any arena, professional wrestling or otherwise. But the Heyman promo, as devastating as it was in its psychological precision, was ultimately the setup for what Logan Paul then delivered physically. And this is where SmackDown last night transformed from a compelling narrative development into something that will be replayed and referenced and discussed in WWE circles for years to come. Because Logan Paul's physical performance on SmackDown last night was not the performance of a celebrity who has learned enough professional wrestling to be functional in this environment. It was the performance of someone who has crossed a threshold that very few performers who come to this business from outside its traditional developmental pipeline ever genuinely cross. The threshold between competent and legitimately elite. Every movement Logan Paul made in that ring last night demonstrated ring intelligence that simply should not be as developed as it is given the relatively compressed timeline of his professional wrestling education. The timing, the spatial awareness, the ability to construct sequences in real time that maximize both competitive effectiveness and dramatic impact for the audience watching at home and in that arena. The specific, practiced quality of his violence that communicates genuine threat without the kind of stiffness or imprecision that exposes inexperience in high-pressure live television environments. Logan Paul on SmackDown last night was operating at a level that demands to be taken seriously on pure professional wrestling merit entirely separate from his celebrity profile or his social media influence or any of the external factors that initially brought him into this world. And against Roman Reigns, with Heyman's psychological damage already compromising the tribal chief's defensive composure, Logan Paul's physical capability found a version of its target that was uniquely susceptible to everything Logan brought to that confrontation. The result was a destruction of Roman Reigns that felt genuinely shocking despite the fact that the Royal Rumble had already demonstrated this partnership's capacity to deliver exactly this kind of outcome. Because seeing it happen once prepares you intellectually for the possibility of seeing it again, but it does not prepare you emotionally. And the emotional impact of watching Roman Reigns dismantled on SmackDown by Logan Paul while Paul Heyman observed with that particular expression of cold, satisfied approval hit every bit as hard the second time as it did the first. And then the mystery attacker arrived. And everything that had already been extraordinary about SmackDown last night became something genuinely historic. The mystery attacker's decision to insert themselves into the SmackDown situation in the aftermath of the Logan Paul and Roman Reigns confrontation revealed something important about this entity's current strategic thinking. Something that suggests the 2026 campaign of violence has perhaps created a degree of overconfidence that is beginning to compromise the careful, methodical, intelligence-driven approach that made the early phases of that campaign so devastatingly effective. The mystery attacker has spent 2026 selecting targets and environments with exceptional precision, never overreaching, never engaging in situations where the variables were insufficiently controlled, never placing themselves in confrontations where the outcome was genuinely uncertain. Every previous strike in this campaign was executed from a position of calculated advantage. Every target was vulnerable in specific, exploitable ways that the mystery attacker had identified and prepared for thoroughly before committing to action. Engaging with Logan Paul and Paul Heyman on SmackDown last night was none of those things. This was the mystery attacker stepping into a situation where the variables were not controlled, where the opponent had not been specifically studied and prepared for, and where the psychological and physical tools that had proven so effective against every previous 2026 target were encountering a combination they had never faced before. Paul Heyman's intelligence network, Logan Paul's physical unpredictability, and the particular energy of a partnership operating with the confidence of people who have just successfully executed one of the most ambitious plans in recent WWE history. The mystery attacker walked into all of that without adequate preparation and paid the full price for that miscalculation. Logan Paul's destruction of the mystery attacker on Smackdown was not just physically comprehensive. It was symbolically devastating in ways that fundamentally alter the mystery attacker's operational reality going forward. Because the carefully maintained mystique of invulnerability, the aura of a force that moves through WWE's roster without encountering anything capable of stopping or even slowing it, that mystique has now been publicly shattered twice. Royal Rumble and Smackdown, the same partnership responsible for both demolitions. And the mystery attacker now has to rebuild their strategic approach from a foundation that has been visibly and publicly cracked in front of the entire WWE universe. So where does all of this leave WWE's landscape in the immediate aftermath of this extraordinary Smackdown broadcast? Roman Reigns has now been destroyed by Logan Paul and Paul Heyman in consecutive major appearances, and the question of when and how the tribal chief finds a path back from this sustained assault on both his physical standing and his psychological foundation is one of the most compelling questions in professional wrestling right now. The Bloodline's response to Heyman's betrayal has yet to fully manifest, and when it does, the energy of that response is going to be seismic. The mystery attacker must now recalibrate their entire 2026 strategy in the aftermath of two consecutive high-profile failures against the same opposition, and how a mind capable of constructing the sophisticated campaign we have witnessed across this year responds to genuine adversity for the first time will tell us enormous amounts about who this person truly is and what they are ultimately capable of. And Logan Paul, guided by the peerless strategic genius of Paul Heyman, stands on Smackdown last night's wreckage as the most genuinely dangerous emerging power in WWE today, a superstar whose ceiling remains completely undefined and whose partnership with the most brilliant managerial mind this industry has ever produced creates a combination that nobody in that locker room has yet demonstrated the capacity to neutralize. I need every single one of you in those comments immediately with your most unfiltered reaction to what Logan Paul and Paul Heyman did to Roman Reigns and the mystery attacker on Smackdown last night. Does Logan Paul now deserve to be considered a legitimate top-tier WWE main eventer based purely on his performance? Can Roman Reigns psychologically recover from being dismantled twice by his former wiseman? And what does the mystery attacker do now that their aura of invulnerability has been publicly broken on consecutive major WWE stages? Share this video right now with everyone in your wrestling community, because Smackdown last night was a historic broadcast and Ringrumble 1 is giving you the most complete and most passionately honest breakdown of its significance available anywhere on the internet today. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, turn on every single notification, because this story is moving at a pace that demands real-time coverage and we are absolutely here for every moment of it. Ringrumble 1. When WWE history gets made, we make sure you never miss a single word of what it means. Always.